Hey, everybody. My guest today is Greg McMillan, an absolute expert at the art of running. He has been an Olympic running coach for two different Olympic Games for multiple athletes. He's also coached 12 national champion runners and has coached world champion runners 6 different years. He was a national champion marathon runner himself in 2009. He has a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, a master's in exercise physiology. He's also written several books on running and is a consulting expert who contributes regularly to magazines such as Runner's World, New York Times, Washington Post, Outside Magazine, Men's Health, etc. The man is considered by many as one of the best running coaches in America, and it was an absolute privilege getting to talk to this guy. So I can go on and on about his accomplishments, but instead I'll just let you listen and learn. Enjoy. To me. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So with that, I'll just jump into the kind of the biggest question that people have. It's a great debate in the Army is like whenever you're training for the 2-mile run for the ACFT or the PT test, one of the biggest questions is how much actual running should you do? Like I'm talking the lengths of the runs, the frequency of the runs, because in a lot of units, like airborne units specifically, they like to run every day. It seems like they're running 2 miles to 5 miles every single day, or even in other units, they're still running a lot. And then there's a lot of people that say, whoa, you're just screwing up your knees and things like that. So what is your recommendation on how much you should actually be putting in per week or so?
Well, like a lot of things when it comes to physical activity and running, it's a little bit individual. So it depends somewhat on the athlete. There are some people, and you've probably seen this, you get a group of people together, right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, they naturally are runners. The running comes easy to them. And so for those athletes, they can train more, they can do more running. And it seems to work really well for them. And then you have another group, and some of us, we struggle with running. It just doesn't come naturally to us. It seems to take more out of us than this other group, right? And so as a coach, when I look at that, I'm thinking, okay, these guys are natural runners, so they can run more. They can go out and do longer runs. They can do faster runs. They can do different types of training than this group over here. This group over here needs to ease into it, needs to be a little bit more careful. We need to slowly build them into runners. And I think that's a big challenge when you have sort of everybody lumped together as one, but yet you have all this individual differences, but everybody's still got to do the same event, right? Everybody's still got to achieve the goal for that performance test. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I think a lot of the armed forces have faced is we've got this performance and we've got all these different tests, and one of them being this running test, but yet we've got such a diverse collection of people that we're trying to get ready. So I don't think it's an easy answer of 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 7 days a week, or whatever. I think it's more of, okay, try to figure out how running is for you. If it comes easy to you, then run more. You can do more of that. If it doesn't come as easy to you, then we need to be more careful. We need to slowly introduce more and more running, or at least more and more specific training to get ready for that performance test.
Right. That's really interesting because I feel like a lot of times when leadership in the Army, they see somebody struggling at running, they say, you need to run more. You need to run more. And those people end up running a ton, even more than the really good runners. So maybe that ends up being kind of counterproductive in that.
Well, maybe so, but certainly I think that they can still do running, but you have to it has to be camouflaged a little bit, right? So if you have a runner that running is not natural to them, to say go and run 3 miles or 5 miles, that is an arduous task. That's really not a pleasant experience, right? So for me, I'm always saying, hey, let's break it down into small little achievable chunks. Things so you can run of high quality and then maybe have a walk rest and then high quality again. Or you're doing it as repetitions or like an interval type training. So because what you run into is the non-runner types, they end up just going so slowly, being demoralized, so out of breath, and the quality of the running is so low. I like to see those athletes have success. And I know we can build them into being able to tolerate running continuously and faster for 2 miles. We may just have to break it into smaller increments to begin with. So that might mean like, hey, let's go quick or like regular running pace for 1 minute, and then go slowly for 30 seconds, and then 1 minute again fast, and then slow. That works really well. This sort of going faster and the recovery break, that works great for those athletes that are struggling to sort of get to become a runner. Because just to go out and run for 3 miles or 5 miles or some 1 mile can be really unpleasant, but they can typically do more volume of running if they have it broken into sort of these intervals or this on-off sort of thing. Again, it's not like sprinting for a minute, but it's just more run a quality pace, and then you probably start to get out of breath, use that 30-second recovery jog to kind of recapture your breath, and then keep going. You'd be surprised. Do that for a month, and all of a sudden you'll see that, oh, I can run farther now. I can run faster now. That seems to turn the tide for most people.
Okay. Yeah. So you want to take it easy and progress up is what I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
once you've been training for a while and you're building that up, is there a certain peak that you should hit of a amount of running? So, say I can get to where I can just run, miles and miles every day. Should I still be doing that, or should I even at that point kind of start limiting myself and mixing it up between intervals and long, slow jogs, or what?
Yeah, I think you need to mix it up a little bit. And also you have other demands on your physical activity training, right? So you've
Yeah.
got to balance sort of the running enough so that you feel like you're getting the fitness that you want to be able to do what you want to do, and balance that with maybe some of the other things that you want to do or have to do, or maybe you struggle with other things. So you need to put energy there. So everybody is a little bit unique in where they kind of find that sweet spot of training. I feel like the sweet spot is where you feel good, you feel, challenged in an appropriate way, but you recover. You never feel like the running component is just wearing you down. You're getting more and more fatigued. Your body's getting tight. You have aches and pains. Those are all red flags. The body's saying, warning, we're getting close to running too much. And so I always say, pull back slightly from that so that you feel good. It's not that it's easy, but you feel good about your running. And most people kind of know that level. So even if you're a really great runner, run as much as you like, as long as it doesn't get into that zone where you feel like it's compromising your other things, or your body's starting to complain, I'm fatigued, I'm tight, or I have some aches and pains.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. So how how should you adjust this for if you're trying to build strength as well? I know you kind of hit on that for a second, but especially with this new ACFT, um, we're also trying to build muscular strength, and
Yep.
some of us are even trying to get a little big and stuff, because there's
Mm-hmm.
deadlift and push-ups and things like
Mm-hmm.
that in there. How
Yep.
do we make sure that we're not sacrificing some of that for our ability to run?
Yeah, that's the big challenge, right? Is you've got strength over here and you've got endurance over here, and they don't often play nicely together. So there's sort of the body doesn't like to work on both of those at the same time, and they seem to compromise slightly each other, the development. So that's another situation where you might again look at what your goals are. So if your goal is, oh, I'm strong enough, I'm great in these other activities, but I'm really suffering in the running, then you have to put more emphasis on the running. If you're the reverse and you're like, oh, I'm okay in running, but I really need to focus some more on strength building, then that running component needs to come down a little bit. So it's a little bit of a balance. It's kind of a recipe, right? Of like, how much can I do of one thing? How does that affect the other? You're trying to be excellent at a really diverse set of challenges, right? And that is the biggest thing. But I think for most people, you just need to look at, what am I really good at? What are my goals? And what are my weaknesses? And then try to think about how you can modulate the training to overcome those weaknesses, take advantage of your strengths, and then lead toward your goal. And I've done that a lot with, first responders and military folks that have to, get ready for a performance test. So for me, the running component's easy. I can tell you exactly the running to do, but it's like, okay, well, now we have to balance that with, I need to be able to do these other activities. And so you're, like you say, you're adding weight because you need more muscle and you want to be stronger. But obviously for running, you typically try to do the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a balance. But I think you can find a nice balance to where for each individual, you can train enough in running so that you're competent and you can meet your goals in that without sacrificing too much some of the other skills that you're trying to develop.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, so whenever you're training for this 2 mile, should we talked a little bit about intervals, but should there be a specific balance between speed work and endurance, and what's the kind of balance or ratio between doing that high intensity stuff and doing these longer runs?
Yeah, I think for people who are non-runners, so let's talk about that group first. So the people that are struggling to hit their time in the 2 mile performance, they just, running doesn't come naturally to them. I think for that group, the sort of on off or the pace change type workouts are perfect for them to do. They don't need to worry so much about the endurance runs at the moment because that'll come once they get this base of being able to kind of, it's walking before running, right? So we're trying to say, okay, let's pick your time. So take your time that you want to hit for your 2 mile. Maybe that's the, the barrier that you have. You say, okay, I'm going to break that up into small increments. So can I run that pace for 30 seconds or 1 minute? And then take a recovery break of 30 seconds to a minute and then do it again and try to see if you can build up to where you've got 2 to 3 miles of doing that repetition, right? So you've got 2 to 3 total miles run at your goal 2 mile pace. But of course, it's got those recovery jogs in between. That's a great first workout for athletes who are trying to get better at their running and achieve their goal time. And it does a couple of things. Well, it does like 3 really important things. First, it helps them actually build their endurance, even though it may be fast running with slow running or walking. That will still build your endurance. You'll still be able to run longer, but you're not having to go out on that 5 mile, terrible drudgery of a run. So that's so you can get endurance training from that sort of pace change work. The second is it will help you with your pacing in the actual performance test. Because what I've seen when I've been involved with those sorts of tests, people are horrible at pacing. They go way too fast in the beginning, and then they really suffer later in the run. And that's where they lose the most time, right? And so I think with this on-off sort of training, this interval type training, what they do is they really groove that goal pace. So then when they get to the performance test, they're more controlled for the first mile, and then they have more energy and more sort of mental ability to push in the second mile. Because the second mile is where it's at, right? The first mile we can probably do. It's the second is where we really struggle. So I'm trying to get them to be stronger later in those sort of walk, jog, or jog breaks in between the goal pace running. That really seems to help them. And then third, it'll just make them feel more competent in running. You'll feel better about your running because you're getting something in. It's not drudgery. It's actually a nice challenge because running has this it's sort of like a small stimulus mentally. That's what those long runs are supposed to be. But everything else that you're probably doing is probably high intensity, right? It's like, get in there and do it. So you have that weird balance. So I think that mentally doing the pace change workouts for those sort of runners that are not quite adept at running is a great way to introduce that. And they'll get 4 to 6 weeks, and you'll be amazed at how much better you feel as a runner. And again, you don't have to sprint for a minute. Just set your time. Just say, okay, what is my time? And then break that down into whatever pace that is. Or if you want to go to the track and do like 200 meters at your goal pace and then jog for 100 meters, you can do it in any way you want. But it's that pace change, that sort of on-off goal pace to recovery, walk, jog, that can really boost their fitness.
Okay, great.
It works really well for those athletes who where gaining muscle is easy. Like they're the big guys, right?
Yeah.
The big athletes, those types, they respond much better to this sort of pace change work than they do, hey, go run for 10 miles. That's a really big challenge for them. So I like that as sort of the basic introduction for those athletes that are struggling to hit their running times.
Yeah, I know. For me, I can't stand long runs, the drudgery of it, like you're saying. The
Mhm.
interval stuff is, I mean, I'm no great runner, but I'm not terrible. And that's the only way I feel like I can tolerate running so much
Yeah.
sometimes is just splitting it up in that interval. So I
Mhm.
definitely see the psychology behind it, or at least making it easier on, or
Yeah.
at least a wimp like me.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all the same way, right? And so you figure out what your sort of mental tendencies are, what you like, what you don't like, and then you have a workaround. I mean, we're all about, what are my challenges facing me and how can I get around it, right? How can I overcome this challenge? So if you're looking at that 2 mile performance test and that's a challenge for you, you got to figure out a workaround for it. And I think the on off is a great way to do it, this sort of interval or repetition training for all athletes. That's something that can be done once or twice per week. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be super extensive. But for those athletes, that can make a big difference. And then you should challenge yourself by going out and saying, okay, I've done this repetition training for 2 or 3 weeks. Now I'm going to go do a 3 mile run or a 5 mile run and see how you feel, right? You may surprise yourself that you're starting to feel better and better. And then that negative run is no longer a negative. Then it opens up the opportunity of what more of the natural runners would be doing. And that's where they are going to be doing maybe once a week. They do a longer run where they're running for 5 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles, depending on their ability level. They may be doing some repetition training that's even more intense than what we were just talking about with the sort of goal pace training. And they may be doing other workouts like hill workouts or tempo runs. That's all perfect for the more experienced runner. If we're talking about someone that's struggling with their running, let's make it super simple. Let's just have it as those sort of goal pace. And I love the goal pace because that's the target. And if you're doing what you guys do, then you like targets. You like, okay, that's my goal. I'm going to get there and I'm going to work toward it. So I think that goal pace workout is great for that.
Okay, good. Good. Um, So our next question is best way to improve your aerobic capacity.
Two ways. Number one is just running more, right? So just
Yeah.
regular running that you do can help improve your VO2 max or your aerobic capacity. And then you can do specific training that is at your VO2 max. And that's about 8 to 10 minute race pace. So as hard as you can go for 8 to 10 minutes, that's roughly what your VO2 max pace is. So if you do workouts at that pace, that will stimulate your VO2 max to increase. So that's where repetition training, and you'll see people, they go to the track maybe and they're doing 200s or 400 meters or 800 meters, half a lap, 1 lap, or 2 laps at sort of a little bit faster than 5K pace for most of us. That's a great way to boost VO2 max. So there's different ways to get at it. There's sort of the one way with more endurance type training, and then there's actual aerobic capacity or VO2 max type training with repetitions.
Okay. Yeah. I know a lot of people like to do other events as well if they don't
Mm-hmm.
enjoy running so much, like
Yep.
swimming and stuff like that. Would you recommend, or do you have any other input on different things they can do besides running? If that's just kind of
Yeah, I'm all for it, right? Run the minimum amount you need to get ready for your test, right? Why run more if you don't need to for that test? So if you just get by with the minimum, and I bet for most athletes, I bet 2 or 3 days of running, if they have 1 day or 2 days where they're doing the goal pace work, and then maybe 1 day where they are just running continuously, challenge themselves mentally to just like endure. I bet that'll be enough for most of them. And then that opens up the opportunity, adding in any other activity, anything that's building your fitness. Could be swimming, could be cycling, could be the elliptical, could be anything that you're doing where you've got a high heart rate for an extended period of time. I love all of that. Again, you're just one person trying to get as fit as possible. and you've just got these components of fitness you're trying to develop. We need the race specific or that 2 mile specific training. I think that workout that we've talked about will do that. You need some regular running, but then everything else is just boost your fitness. What makes you feel better?
For sure. Yeah. So that kind of plays into my next question is like, well, if you're training someone, just the average runner, or specifically a soldier for the 2 mile,
Mm-hmm.
what would a week look like just in general? What kind of workouts? I mean, I know you kind of talked about doing the interval stuff at certain
Yep.
points, and a long
Mm-hmm.
run thrown in there, some other activities. But can you give us a little better picture of what that looks like?
Sure. So if you're new to running and your running is not your thing, like we said, I think 1 or 2 days per week doing that repetition workout, that goal pace workout where you're trying to get ready for that 2 mile test. And then one day where you're challenging your endurance. So it might be, I'm going to run continuously for 30 minutes or 35 minutes or 40, whatever it is for that athlete. That's what you're doing. So that's your 3 days. And then add in anything else you can. That would be great. If you can swim, cycle, whatever, that will be awesome. If you're more of a natural runner, then I would say one day is that goal pace workout. Let's continue to work on that, get better and better at that. Another day should be sort of a medium effort run. Some people call that a tempo run. It's something kind of a medium hard pace. So it's not an easy pace like you normally run, but it's not really fast like your goal pace, like your 2 mile run would be. It's sort of in between that. And that usually lasts around 10 to 25 minutes. That's a great, so you might warm up for 5 or 10 minutes, run at that medium hard pace for about, 10 or 20 minutes, and then cool down for 5 or 10 minutes. That's a great second run, a second workout during the week. And then a longer run, something where you are challenging yourself. And if you're comfortable at 45 minutes for your run, then build up to where an hour gets comfortable. If you're comfortable at an hour, see if you can get to 75 minutes, hour 20, hour 15, and then an hour and a half. Anything around an hour is great for endurance building. And then they can sprinkle in shorter runs if they run more times per week than that. So if they like to run 6 days per week, then you've got 3 additional days that you can just do your regular, maybe 30 to 45-minute run. Call it a day. That's a great schedule. With that more, natural runner, we're getting in the goal pace work. We're getting in the VO2 max work. We're getting in some stamina training with that tempo run workout. And we're getting in the endurance with the long run. That's a really nice weekly schedule for somebody that's building toward this 2 mile performance.
Okay. All right. So another question we had was from my more smart aleck peers. It says, do people that run competitively know that they don't have to?
Well, I guess I would say yes, they do. And like a lot of things, we volunteer to do challenging stuff. So just like all of you guys, you have volunteered to do this challenging thing. Competitive runners, that's their outlet for voluntarily accepting a challenge that they want to meet. So, for me, it's all the same. We all have like, what do I want to accomplish? What's my challenge? For competitive runners, that seems to be their outlet.
Yeah, definitely. That should definitely motivate them to get out there and bust their butts, using the military reference there. But on that note, like you had mentioned, to make it more enjoyable for people that really do believe it this way, swimming, using the psychological effect of using interval training.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other recommendations that you would give to people that just don't like to, but some of us, I mean, we have to.
Yeah, you got to do it. And so you got to figure out a mental way around it, right? So the brain is going to be sending lots of negative messages. That's what it does. When it feels a threat, it sends negative messages. It's trying to say, this hurts, stop, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to send lots more fatigue to you. That's just a normal protective mechanism of the brain. But that is trainable. And you guys know this better than anybody. It is trainable that you can slowly, by gradually exposing yourself to that level of discomfort, to that level of suffering, to that situation, if you gradually get more and more used to that, the brain no longer screams at you. So it begins to decrease the messaging of fatigue, decrease that screaming, stop, why am I doing this? I could be sitting on the couch. I mean, all the messages that, you get when you first start running, that is common. It's common. Even the Olympians, they have the same messaging. It's just that they slowly over time continue to get that brain to be more and more comfortable with that being uncomfortable. So I think with running, when it's not natural to you, you just got to think about the drip method. Just drip it in, that you're just slowly getting exposure to those feelings of fatigue. And you guys know, I mean, there's sometimes you got a big giant amount of suffering, and that's really hard to take, and you've got to try to figure out strategies. But most of the time, it's little bits of suffering over time. That's what builds a soldier, right? It's a little bit of exposure to greater and greater challenges. And then suddenly the stuff that was scary to you or was really uncomfortable or you didn't like when you first started, now you do that with no problem, right? You fully accept this is the level of, this is what it is, and you're okay with it. The same thing has to happen with running. You just got to do it in small amounts. That's why I like for those new runners, let's do it where you're not getting completely demoralized with this continuous run and running so slowly you just feel terrible. Let's do it with some sort of repetition so you start to get more and more comfortable with that type of suffering. And when you do, then suddenly you'll be a better runner. And that performance test, while it still will be very challenging, it won't be this gigantic sort of hurdle that you can't get over.
Wow. Yeah. I had never really thought of it that way. The comparison there with training for the military and stuff yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I'm definitely going to use that.
Well, and that's what your instructors are having you do, right? They have done it from day one. They have said, we're going to build you, and here's the process we're going to use. And they don't give you the stuff that you learned later at first. They give you the basics. It's called basic training, right? They give you the basics and they build you. You learn physically, you learn mentally how to do all of this stuff. And running is the same way. It's a sport we can all do. It just, some of us, we got to ease into it a little bit more slowly than others, but it can be done no different than, I'm sure every soldier can think of some hurdle that they've gotten. Maybe it's literally a hurdle they've gotten over, a wall or whatever, but they've gotten through something. I mean, isn't that what you feel like one of the values that comes from the training that you guys do is that you learn, I can do it. And that's just the same mentality. Maybe bringing that into the running component will serve you well.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right. So if someone wanted to learn more and learn some more information about you, your site, your calculator, and all that stuff, where would they go? Where would they find you?
Yeah, McMillanRunning.com, McMillan running.com has all of my articles, videos, all the training plans are available. There's 2-mile plans available for people. There's the running calculator. There's lots of content there. So that would be, just go there and surf around. And if you have any questions, just hit the contact button and we're happy to help.
Yeah, check it out, folks. It's really cool. I've been on there many times now, and I've looked at it. Really cool calculator and stuff to help show you your pace and stuff. Really cool site. But before we go, is there anything you'd like to say to the troops out there that are going to be listening?
Well, hey, I think you've got a challenge before you, and it's set. So you view that just as you've attacked every other challenge that you've had, and figure out what works for you. Develop your mental processes of how you're going to deal with it when it gets challenging. Pace yourself right. Make that second mile your best mile. If you make the second mile your best mile, you have a great chance of achieving your goal time.
All right. Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for joining me, Greg.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Yep, you too.